On Spotlight this weekend, I'm being joined by Nugent, who is a senior journalist and former BBC editor. He'll be talking about Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister and the impact it could have on India-UK relations. Nick, many thanks for joining us here on World Today. Now, history has been scripted, but I have to ask you this. Was UK ready for a man of colour, or are we seeing him at the top post only because it was an internal party process?
Well, I would think the early evidence is yes, they are ready for a man of colour. I know it seems strange, but if we look back, firstly, Boris Johnson's cabinet, formed 3 years ago, was full of people of colour, male and female, and I think that was quite a breakthrough. But if we're looking at Rishi Sunak, I mean, some people asked me before he was chosen whether he had any chance or whether we still have a little bit of inbuilt racism that would block him. To which I said, well, don't forget that he was elected by the citizens of a very conservative part of the country, North Yorkshire, as their Member of Parliament in 2015 for the first time. And he returned with a very large majority, 27,000 majority, which in British terms is very significant. So I think that was in a way, the milestone that we have no problem electing men and women of colour to our parliament. That's been the case for some years. But yes, of course, we've gone a stage further now, and we've elected a man of colour to the top job. Great, as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to hear this racism accusation anymore.
Let's discuss policies of Rishi Sunak's government. As the Finance Secretary, his policies on immigration or on crime for that matter, in a certain way would have been called hawkish. Further, he has also reappointed Suella Braverman, whose statements on Indians overstaying their visas, immigration and the FTA did not really go down well with New Delhi. How do you then see his government really handle ties with India?
Well, you're absolutely right here, and I can't. We're all wondering that, to be honest with you. He was elected, and clearly his top priority is to sort out the economy, and that's what all the focus has been on so far. But in the last 24 hours, especially, or perhaps a bit more, since he reappointed Suella Braverman, as you pointed out, the whole immigration debate has come centre stage. He is known to be somebody who wants to limit overall migration to Britain, perhaps to 100,000 a year, something like that, which is slightly confusing the issue because immigration is about more than migration. I mean, it's about people coming on short-term visas as well, both for study and for business. So we're not quite sure how to rationalise what you might call Suella Braverman's rather tough, rather hard-line approach to all immigration, with certainly Rishi's heritage, that's one thing, and I mean, what we do learn is that he's very keen on attracting well-qualified immigrants, people especially who can star in the field of science and technology. And of course, we know that there are pretty bright minds in India. So he has to find a way to progress this. Now, as you know, Boris Johnson had promised to conclude a free trade agreement with India by Diwali. And as we now know, Boris Johnson was well out of the scene before Diwali, and so indeed was Liz Truss. So we're really looking to see how they can rationalise the strong desire to sign a free trade agreement with India with the whole migration issue and perhaps India's demands that we should relax the work provisions on those who come to study in Britain. I don't know where it's going, but you're quite right to point out that the Home Secretary tends to be rather even more hawkish on that line than we believe the Prime Minister is. So they have to sort it out between themselves.
So you mentioned the FTA, Nick. Now, the larger question over here is not just about the nitty-gritty and the irritants in the trade ties between India and the United Kingdom. It is also to do with political will. Do you really see both sides have the political will to really take the FTA forward despite and in spite of the irritants that could be a stumbling block?
Well, 2 points. Firstly, it's by no means top of the agenda because he has a lot of what we would consider to be more important things on his in his in-tray, especially to do with our economy, our taxation, our spending, and such forth. A lot of economic issues that relate to Britain specifically. But as for further ahead, whether both sides have the political will, I can only speak for Britain, I can't speak for India, but I do believe it is a very high priority for post-Brexit Britain to sign trade agreements. And India is and always has been a very significant trading partner. So I would suspect that in terms of our international relations, it is high on the agenda, but it is something that we will expect to move on before long. I do believe that whether under an Indian Prime Minister or any Prime Minister, trade relations with India and a free trade agreement are a high priority. Yes.
Speaking of priorities, now on foreign policy, Liz Truss mentioned it while she was leaving 10 Downing Street, and Rishi Sunak mentioned it after he went and met the King, which is the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, that Ukraine is going to be important for the United Kingdom and Britain is going to stand by Ukraine. We do know that there are differences between the UK, the West, and how India really views the Russia-Ukraine war. Would that be an area of concern for the Sunak administration?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think different approaches on Ukraine is an obstacle to Anglo-Indian relations. After all, Anglo-Indian relations go back a lot further than Ukraine and such forth. We've been, countries have been intertwined for centuries, as you well know. And certainly in the 75 years of India's independence, there's always been a good relationship between Britain and India. I like to think that our government understands India's reasons for being hesitant or for not joining the Ukraine camp. It's very evident why. But I don't think that itself is an obstacle. I think the much greater obstacle, as we've already alluded to, is the issue of immigration, particularly, I should say, what Suella Braverman talked about, the non-returns, the Indians who apparently don't leave Britain after they've finished their studies and their visas expired. That, as far as I can tell, is the main issue at the moment. So if that can be resolved, then I don't think there's any other substantial issue in the way. Britain wants a trade agreement with India. There's no question about that.
Finally, before I let you go, Nick, the important question politically on the domestic front is that there are many challenges ahead for Sunak. Could he really be the hero when it comes to bringing back an order in the economy? Or could he really be the fall guy where after a year or so we'll see a coup or we'll see him dislodged so that there is another leader, Boris Johnson many would say, to really lead the party into general elections? Could that really happen?
Well, you're asking absolutely the question that is on all our minds at the moment. I would say the my initial response to that is very positive. Very good signs that the value of the pound has sharpened, has increased. The value of government borrowing has decreased. Very, very good sign, because he was generally considered, Rishi Sunak was generally considered to have been a very good Minister of Finance or Chancellor of the Exchequer. So he has a good reputation in that regard. He will be working hard, as you probably know, we're all awaiting a budget to put right the damage done to Liz Truss's so-called mini-budget. And now it's been delayed. It's going to be, I think, 2.5 weeks ahead. So a lot depends on that. You know, that's how we will get, we've got the initial judgment, markets are performing well. The second judgment will come when that statement comes on the 17th of November. So the signs are good. But if you want me to make a prediction, it is that Rishi Sunak will last the 2 years until we have to have another election by law. What's much more questionable is whether he will bring the Conservative Party up enough to win that election. He will lead the party into that election. Whether he will win it is rather more questionable. But at the moment, I think I would predict he has a good 2 years leadership ahead of him in the post.